Amazon began as a simple online bookstore, but from the very beginning, Jeff Bezos treated it as something much larger than retail. He was not interested in selling books efficiently. He was interested in building infrastructure. Bezos believed that whoever controlled logistics data and consumer behavior would eventually control commerce itself. In the early years, Amazon lost money consistently, yet Wall Street tolerated it because growth numbers were explosive. Revenue climbed while profits remained intentionally thin. This was not a failure. It was strategy. Amazon reinvested everything into warehouses, software, and delivery networks, while competitors focused on margins. Bezos framed patience as vision and losses as long-term dominance. Investors bought the story. As Amazon expanded beyond books, it quietly reshaped how supply chains worked. Sellers became dependent on Amazon's platform for visibility, pricing, and survival. The company positioned itself as a neutral marketplace while simultaneously collecting vast amounts of data on every transaction. Which products sold fastest, which failed, which price points worked, and which sellers struggled. This information gave Amazon an asymmetric advantage. It could see the entire market from above, while individual sellers saw only their own narrow slice. Over time, Amazon began launching its own private label products that mirrored the most successful third-party sellers. Officially, this was competition. In reality, it was data-driven replication at scale. Inside the company, a different story was unfolding. Amazon's internal culture revolved around relentless efficiency metrics and constant pressure. Employees were encouraged to work harder, move faster, and question less. Warehouses became symbols of Amazon's dominance and controversy at the same time. Productivity was measured down to the second. Breaks were timed, algorithms tracked movement, and human error translated directly into performance penalties. For Bezos, this was optimization. For critics, it was dehumanization. Yet customers rarely saw this side. They saw fast delivery, low prices, and convenience. That convenience came at a cost that was largely invisible. By the mid-2010s, Amazon was no longer just a retailer. It was a logistics empire, a data company, and a cloud computing giant. Amazon Web Services quietly became one of the most profitable parts of the business, powering governments, corporations, and startups around the world. This diversified power made Amazon unusually resilient. If retail margins shrank, cloud profits compensated. If public criticism increased, customer behavior barely changed. Convenience proved stronger than outrage. Regulators began to notice. Lawmakers started asking whether a company could be both marketplace and competitor without abusing its position. Amazon denied wrongdoing, insisting that its scale benefited consumers. But behind the scenes, the imbalance of power continued to grow. As Amazon's influence expanded, its relationship with sellers grew increasingly tense. Small businesses that once celebrated access to a global audience began to realize how dependent they had become. Fees increased gradually, advertising became almost mandatory, and algorithm changes could erase years of work overnight. Sellers complained that Amazon forced them into a pay-to-survive model where visibility was no longer organic but auctioned. At the same time, Amazon's private label brands quietly appeared next to independent products, often priced lower and promoted more aggressively. Officially, Amazon claimed a strict firewall between seller data and product development. Former employees and internal reports suggested otherwise. The marketplace was no longer neutral. It was tilted in favor of the platform owner. Labor issues pushed Amazon further into the spotlight. Investigative reports described warehouse conditions where speed targets were relentless and injury rates exceeded industry averages. Workers described an environment where missing a target could mean termination, and bathroom breaks were treated as inefficiencies. Amazon responded with statements emphasizing safety investments and competitive wages. Both narratives existed simultaneously. One spoke of opportunity and innovation, the other of exhaustion and disposability. Public reaction fluctuated, but consumer behavior remained largely unchanged. One-click convenience outweighed moral discomfort for millions of customers. Amazon's scale also allowed it to shape entire industries. Traditional retailers struggled to compete on price and delivery speed. Many closed stores or exited markets entirely. Local economies felt the impact as small shops disappeared and tax structures favored centralized distribution centers. Meanwhile, Amazon's lobbying presence grew rapidly. The company invested heavily in political influence, arguing that regulation would harm consumers and innovation. Behind closed doors, lawmakers debated whether Amazon had become too essential to challenge. The question was no longer whether Amazon played by the rules, but whether the rules were written for companies of this size at all. Jeff Bezos rarely addressed criticism directly. Instead, he framed Amazon's mission as customer obsession. Everything else was secondary. Shareholders rewarded this philosophy. Amazon's market valuation surged, turning Bezos into one of the richest individuals in history. Yet the company's success exposed a paradox. The more indispensable Amazon became, the harder it was to hold accountable. Governments relied on Amazon Web Services for critical infrastructure. Businesses relied on Amazon's marketplace for revenue. Consumers relied on Amazon for everyday needs. Dependency diluted resistance. Antitrust scrutiny intensified across the United States and Europe. Regulators examined whether Amazon abused its dual role as platform and competitor. Investigations focused on data usage, pricing manipulation, and exclusionary practices. Amazon argued that competition was fierce, pointing to Walmart, Target, and emerging e-commerce players. Critics countered that none matched Amazon's integration of logistics data, cloud computing, and consumer behavior analytics. This was not traditional monopoly power, it was ecosystem dominance. Inside Amazon, decision-making remained centralized and data-driven. Human judgment often took a back seat to algorithmic optimization. This efficiency fueled growth but also removed friction that might have slowed harmful practices. Algorithms did not account for worker fatigue, community impact, or long-term market diversity. They optimized for speed, cost, and engagement. As a result, Amazon moved faster than regulators and adapted quicker than critics. Each scandal faded into the background of next-day delivery and discounted prices. Public trust eroded gradually, not through a single collapse but through accumulation. Stories of warehouse injuries, seller bankruptcies, and tax avoidance created a persistent unease. Amazon was no longer just admired, it was questioned. Yet questioning did not translate into abandonment. Convenience proved sticky. The system Bezos built was too efficient to ignore and too integrated to escape easily. By the early 2020s, Amazon had become a defining force of modern capitalism. It represented both the promise and the cost of scale-driven technology. The company delivered unprecedented efficiency while concentrating power in ways few corporations ever had. Critics argued that Amazon's model externalized risk onto workers, sellers, and communities while internalizing profit and data. Supporters argued that consumer choice remained voluntary and innovation undeniable. Both arguments contained truth. Bezos stepped back from the CEO role, but Amazon's structure remained unchanged. Leadership transitions did not alter incentives. Growth, efficiency, and dominance continued to guide strategy. Regulatory pressure increased, but meaningful structural change remained slow. Breaking up Amazon proved politically and economically complex. The company was woven into daily life and global infrastructure. Dismantling it risked unintended consequences. Amazon's dark side was never hidden behind secrecy. It existed in plain sight, buried under speed and convenience. Customers benefited from a system that quietly demanded more from those behind the scenes. Sellers competed in a marketplace owned by their strongest rival. Workers powered an engine that rarely slowed down. Amazon did not invent these dynamics, but it perfected them at scale. The story of Amazon is not one of villainy alone. It is a cautionary tale about what happens when efficiency becomes the highest value and oversight lags behind innovation. Amazon changed how the world shops, works, and computes. In doing so, it forced society to confront uncomfortable questions about power, dependency, and responsibility. The company continues to move forward, but its legacy is already written into the structure of the modern economy. Convenience came fast, accountability followed slowly, and the balance between the two remains unresolved.